Where did it all start for you before you got to a point of finding the help that you needed?
So after I divorced from my wife, I went looking for men's groups because I figured that of all the problems in all the relationships that I was having, the common denominator was me.
Hey guys, what's up and welcome back to the channel where it's all about stepping up. I'm back on the Gold Coast, this time joined by another dear friend of mine, Lindsay Mills. In today's episode, we'll get to hear his own personal life experiences of what he's had to go through in navigating his own mental states and how he was able to overcome it, but also become a beacon for other men that are also struggling with their own mental battles. But look, I don't want to give away too much as you'll get to hear so much from today's episode. So without further ado, let's dive into the show. Hey guys, today I'm back on the Gold Coast, this time joined with a lovely gentleman that I've met throughout my journey in discovering more about the mental health. It's Lindsay, who I'm honored to have on today's show, On the Road with Ta. So before we dive into it, Lindsay, do you mind just sharing a little bit about yourself and your background?
Yeah, a bit of who am I? My name is Lindsay Mills. I'm 48 years old. I live here at Runaway Bay, and it's a long way that I came about here. I've lived in a lot of places around Australia. Out of high school, I became a tradesman. I did an electrical apprenticeship and then fell out of it via a motorcycle accident, and went on to study at university and fell back into the trades as a supervisor, became a builder, became back to a high volume supervisor, and blew myself out. And some 20 odd years after the motorcycle accident and my disability, I succumbed to that and figured that I couldn't do the trade work anymore, so I left. And it coincided with my divorce from my wife and children, and led to a journey of self-discovery, much like you said you're on yourself, to become a better man and to unpick all the old habits that I used to have and the old learnings of a generation and two generations previous, to become a man of who I am now.
So with that motorcycle accident, was that part of the condition to the results of what had happened with your loss of your arm?
That got chopped off whack by a keep left sign in the motorcycle accident. And I damaged my leg and gave myself a good knock on the head too. And the hand that was missing was not part of my recovery any more than getting used to doing things one-handed. In fact, opposite-handed, because I used to be right-handed. And there's some awful stories of the things that I might do. Brushing my teeth opposite-handed the first times, as I got more toothpaste over my face than anywhere else. And there's some more horrible stories than that, you know.
Oh, unless you want to still keep telling us more.
That's just what it was, and that's who I. That's the highlight stories of who I am today, and now these days I work in the men's work sector. I volunteer in the men's work sector. This is not especially monetized. I volunteer. I run a couple of men's groups around the coast. I run a fathers group in association with those other groups, and
when you say the men's group, which in particular?
The men's group that I'm organised or involved with is called Complete Men. Complete Men is an organisation of peer support groups. There's no training. There's no the purpose of Complete Men is to give men a place where they can come and be free to be them and become the best man that they can be. Look, I use it for my own purposes. Other men will use it for their own individual reasons, but for me it's a place where I go and practice being different to the old arsehole that I might have been. And when I find a way that I can practice that in safety and finesse it, then I can do it in the outside world and deliberately make those better choices because I've already practiced it once, twice, 3 times in that safety group. Even as simple as being vulnerable to tell a group of other men my feelings. You know, when I feel that I can do that safety and I learn the words that I can use that without inciting somebody else, then I can do it in public or with my partner or with my parents or with the cafe person. People, when someone beeps me on the horn on the roundabout and I realise that it's not really me, it's them having a bad day and I'm off the roundabout anyway, what's the point of telling them all about it?
Absolutely. Good on you, mate. But before we kind of dive on into the rest of what you've achieved, where did it all start for you before you got to a point of finding the help that you needed?
Oh, I was maybe 16, 8 years ago. I was just short of 40 years old. My marriage had been falling apart steadily. Previous to that, in the years prior to that, I'd gone and worked fly-in, fly-out roles building homes. I was a home builder for the Plantation Homes and Metricon Homes and these major national project home builders. So I'd fly into a different state or a different location, a remote location, and build 20, 30, 40 odd homes and pack up and go somewhere else. So 9 months to a year in one place and then pack up and leave and go to another place and do it all over again. So fly in, fly out. I was working a 2 weeks on, 1 weekend off roster. And that was hard on my family. My wife had just, when I left, my son was 4 months old. And so for a couple of years, my wife was the sole parent. I mean, all of my income was provided back to the family. It's not like the family had to do it without assistance. But I was not there being the family man. I was not there being the dad. All of the day-to-day, the duties fell upon my wife, and that became hard for her. When I returned from that, I still took on drive-in, drive-out roles that had me away driving. I drove 100,000 kilometres every year for 2 and 3 years, which is an awful long time on the road away from family, and that's plus doing the work that I had to do within the organisation, insurance building throughout the whole of northern New South Wales.
And how did you discover Complete Men's then?
That was a roundabout way. So after I divorced from my wife, within a year after that, I did a session with there was a program called Fight Like a Pro, where I thought if I went and became a stronger, tougher, I could handle a fight man, that'd help me be better. It wasn't about that at all. It was about men combining and becoming together in a team that punched on together, but without the anger, with the sport of boxing. Can I mention names in this podcast? Gavin Top was the founder of Fight Like a Pro, and Gavin Top now does a program called Modern Men or Modern Man. Anyway, Gavin Top was the beginning of my change into men's groups and my shift into that. He's a ringleader. The man is incredible. He's an ex-boxing champion who became a champion for men's personal self-development and family togetherness. That was early days. From there, I went looking for men's groups where I didn't have to fight, where we could just talk. Actually, what I learned from the boxing thing was that when I was fighting, I didn't need to fight with anger. Aggression, sure, but not anger. And by the end of it, we had 12 weeks of training and then a ring bout for 12 different pairs of men, 24 men into 12 fights, a ring bout in the convention centre with 1,000 spectators on paid tickets and dinner and the whole. It was a proper boxing event. And when I won that bout, I felt awful because I'd just beaten up one of my mates and I cut him and he couldn't continue the fight. And man, I just hurt my friend, and I found that I don't want to fight anymore. Even in the family separation from my wife and with my children, I didn't want to fight for my kids. I didn't want to fight. I just wanted to be with and have an arrangement or a scarce or a sparse, but a relationship nonetheless with my children and their mother and develop that. So what I did was I got involved with, I went looking for men's groups because I figured that of all the problems in all the relationships that I was having, the common denominator was me. I was the only thing that was the same for every different relationship that was failing, and so maybe the problem is me. So that was a big realization of emptiness and incompleteness. I was following a man on Facebook named Danny Redbard. Now he was Danny, another surname previously, but Danny Redbard, who was into spirituality and emotional cleansing and spiritual healing and the likes. He was also involved with a multinational organisation of men's help group called Mankind Project. There's one down here on the Gold Coast at Nerang. It still operates. It operates every week on a Tuesday. So I got down there and enjoyed it so much that I dedicated, I will do this every Tuesday for 1 year. So that was, for me, something of a...
turning point?
It was a decision point, a commitment point to my self-improvement. I will do this every week for a year. And then that turned into more like 2 years. And at some point along there became... there was another group on because I wanted to develop a relationship with my children. I was having challenges with that. I was not able to see my children just because mum said no, and I couldn't force her. I'd realised that it's not my place to force somebody else. So I focused on myself and developing something of a relationship with my children. I did a course called Building Better Fathers. It was issue number 4 of that, the 4th time that project had been run. I went back and did that again for BBF 5, Building Better Fathers. And then I think I skipped one and started at 7 so 5 was a returning father, 6 or 7 was as a co-facilitator. And I've been doing
These
that.
part of the modules that you're
Building
about?
Better Fathers is an 8-week program, an 8-week course, similar to what I'm involved in now at Complete Men. It's a circle group where we learn something about ourselves. We assess my own reactions to my children's crying or arguing or bickering or pushing or not eating their broccoli or whatever it might be that often triggers a man and a dad or a parent. And instead of clouting the kid over the back of the head like my parents might have, I didn't have to do what my parents did. There's other ways to do it, to raise my children without the fear of the dad's hand or without the fear of the parents' eruption into what amounts to an emotional tantrum. You're not doing what I want you to do and you have to do it. No, how many times do I have to tell you this? So that was on a Tuesday night. I stopped doing Mankind Project, and Building Better Fathers is involved with Complete Men. They were supported and coordinated by Complete Men at the time. Then after I'd done that, I found Complete Men associated and started doing the group for Complete Men at Robina. Found that there was another group at Coomera, so I joined the Coomera bit, which is a little closer to where I live. And then grew within that group and started getting involved as a coordinator or as a volunteer. What can I do to help the group? Really, I can lead the group through the check-in round, and really I can present a process because I had heaps of ideas of processes that I could run for the group, and then I became more involved with the management side and started coordinating both groups and running a volunteers group within each group that can support and make it happen. And so now I'm a weekly men's group coordinator for Complete Men.
And how does that make you feel now that you've gone through all the rigorous training or processes of what you went through to get to this point?
What I see now is that is that we're building a community of better men, better fathers, better men, better mates, better dads, better lovers, better brothers, better husbands, just plain old better men that don't react with the cliche behaviour, the patterns of how it used to be done. There's one that I remember I read once upon a time, not necessarily aimed at men, but I told it to my mum. I asked her, why does she cut the leg off the lamb before she puts it in the oven? And it turned out that she didn't really know. That's what her mum taught her. You cut the leg off the lamb to fit it in the oven, and then it came about that their oven was small when they were a kid, so she had to cut it off. I think Mum might have asked her mum, why did you cut that piece off? She said, because it wouldn't fit in the oven if I left it on. Well, now we've got these great big ovens and we could put 3 lambs in it, but still cut it off. Why? So undoing that, or understanding that some of these old patterns no longer serve me, there's no point in cutting it off, leave it on. Yeah. Getting involved in Complete Men is largely about that, and men can come and talk about some of the things that I do, that I can go and talk about some of the things that I do that no longer serve me, and I've realised this is not for very good reason. Why? Yeah.
Oh man, that's so amazing to hear that story. Also, what would be some of the resources that would be helpful for someone like listening or watching this podcast that helped you?
Yeah. I got into the men's self-help books. That's the best way I can describe it. I don't know what the library search category would be. Things like Paul Hanna. Paul Hanna's book was You Can Do It. I reread that again. I'd read it years before and reread it again. It's as relevant today as it was 45 years ago when it was written. Steve Biddulph's book, Raising Boys, Raising Girls, Raising Boys. He's got multiple books. The New Manhood was pivotal in me undoing, and I tend to go through a book with my pencil behind my ear, and I write my notes in the book and do the exercise in the book where I can read back through it and go, or reference to it. A lot of these books I no longer have because I lend them out, and I often wonder whether the new men reading them write their own notes or whether they enjoy reading my notes in there. And another one by David Dida, The Way of the Superior Man, which sounds a bit up myself, but it's the way the man takes it. And that's not the way I was becoming superior to who I used to be. That was a crucial point of my development, for certain.
Hey guys, thanks again for tuning back in. And look, if you're finding value in today's show, please subscribe and hit that like button and share, because it helps this channel to grow and reach out to individuals and communities that are wanting to share their stories, so that others like yourself or someone you know of could possibly learn from some of the steps and strategies used in helping you to also navigate your mental state. So without further ado, let's dive back into the show.
Oh man, that's amazing tips too, because I'm gonna use that.
Right.
So thanks for that. Also, what would be something like for, say, someone that was interested in attending the Complete Men's meetings? What would they expect to walk into or be greeted by on arrival?
Oh yeah. The group is consistently run to a format. We have a sharp start time and a sharp finish time. We have the start of the meeting is an administration, a housekeeping round. We read out every week. We read out the protocols. There's a list of 9 protocols that sets the ground rules for how we interact within the group. The way that a man sets out the way that a man can contribute by speaking in the group, or by a hand gesture or a body gesture to indicate without speaking. The confidentiality, of the group, the mindfulness which we ask that men come to the group without influence by mind-altering substances, alcohol, marijuana, prescription drugs are accepted and understood and tolerated, but come under less influence of, come able to think and be rational, be introspective. We have a check-in round where each man gets to check in what's happened for him during the week. We ask to speak in I language, not in you language or they language. Or when I say I or we, I'm making acceptance by others more important than my own self, is one of the protocols. So if I speak about how it was for me, then it becomes less about blame and more about feeling, talking about the emotions that I experienced during the week and how hard it might have been to manage that or deal with that, or perhaps I overreacted or simply reacted to my emotion and, man, I could have done that better. So an opportunity to reflect and respond rather than to perceive and react. That's the check-in round, is talk about my emotions, my behaviours, how it's impacted me and how it impacted others, not how what they did made me feel. I have the feelings and I own the feelings. We have a break, which is sometimes that can be heavy, sitting around the group in circular format, speaking my own truth and my own vulnerability and hearing the same from other men, hearing their vulnerability or their emotional share allows me to check in how that makes me feel or how I react and respond in the same situations, similar situations. All of it helps me melt and process my own emotions into some semblance of good bloke, of stability and calmness and centre. We have a break, which is really valuable to just let that bit go and understand that we're all still mates, even though we've just been. Some of us might cry, or some of us might shout in anger, or some of us might really chew the thumbnails off in anxiety, or melt into depression in safety in that check-in. And to have the break and drag out of it helps me understand that whatever the feeling was when I was feeling it, 20 minutes later doesn't have to be the same feeling. I can let it go. So it continues to cycle round and feel that emotions can come and go without holding on to it and clinging on to it. Then we return for a second half that is we call it a process. It's a topic of conversation that asks men, how do you feel about this and what does it make you experience in terms of emotions, and how do you usually react or respond to it? How does that work out? How's that working out for you in your life, mate? Is this an opportunity to reframe it and rewire it for the mind and consider alternative reactions?
Oh man, that's so cool. And I do recall coming in on those meetings, but I just also wanted the listeners and the viewers to hear what it's all about, what it entails during your, as a beginner, rocking up.
Oh man, as a beginner, it could be really hard. I remember the first time that I joined MKP, and bless them all, I turned up on the first time and walked up the gangplank into this heritage listed property there at Nerang. The fellow saw me and he said, "Mate, you look new here. Come on in," and he embraced me and hugged me, and I thought, this is a little bit gay. This was the middle of COVID. How do you get away with this? We're supposed to wear masks and not be within 1.5, and you just embraced me, and he introduced me to another couple of fellows, and they did the same. Is this a gay group? I was all worried. Not really worried, but it entered my mind. I'm okay with sexuality, whichever way it bends and kinks. That's each to their own. but I wondered if this was a bit of a thing in the group and maybe I weren't going to fit. Silly, isn't it? What it was acceptance. Actually, I broached it with them down the line there a bit, a few weeks into it, and I said I wondered if that was is this a bit of a queer group? And they laughed. And how do you feel about that now, Lindsay? I said, come here and give me a big hug, Bear. As the new man, the first time I shared in, I was really nervous. Maybe I overshared. I was reluctant to go back. In fact, the first time I went, I didn't go in. The first time I sat in the car and watched what happened and left. I went back a second week and went in on that second week. I know there's been some men with similar experience in Complete Men.
And those things happen, eh? Like,
definitely. It can be confronting to confront self. How can I look at this with a great white spotlight when I've tucked it away into my shadows? Mankind Project tends to look more at the deep dark shadows and shine a light in there and find that piece of gold in the closet that I've been hiding. It's funny when it's not funny, it's astounding when I find the gold that I've been looking for and hiding away from all at the same time. It's often in that dark corner, exactly where I put it. Emotionally speaking, metaphorically speaking, that I tucked away and exhibited shadow behaviours around that of shouting at someone to get my way because I can shout louder than anybody else. When really all I needed to do was ask them to do it politely, because you understand that I'm the authority on this building site, and I'd appreciate it if you do that today. Yes, sir. Yes, got it. Huh. That was much easier than shouting and getting into a fighting match or a slinging match, yeah? Okay, so for beginners, these stories can really trail off. For beginners, it can be confronting, it can be frightening, it can be embarrassing. What I think a lot of beginners find, new men find in the group at the end, is comfort that there's a lot of men just like them. That they are not the only one experiencing this loneliness. In fact, a lot of the men in the group are experiencing the same loneliness altogether on their own. It's so silly. They find comfort in the group scenario. They find camaraderie in a community of men. They find that there are men that they can speak to without shame, or they can share their shame, because lots of men share that shame. It's the beginning of enlightenment and empowerment and an ability to observe my own behaviour, to step back and observe that from a third person perspective, even while I'm right there in it.
man, that's beautiful. Okay, so for our viewers, what's 2 or 3 things you'd like for them to remember about this discussion today?
Perhaps the first thing is, if a man doesn't reach out for help, no one's going to help him. Much like a surf lifesaver watching the ocean, if there's somebody out there who looks like they're swimming, the lifesaver doesn't know they need help. If the lifesaver gets on the board and goes out to help the man and reaches out to grab him, but the man won't grab back, well, what can the lifesaver do? So what I want men to remember, anybody out there, women, men, look, I work in the men's world. If you want help, ask for it. No one's going to help you until you do. Another thing that I'd like people to remember is that you're not doing this on your own. There's everybody else is around here doing the same thing on their own with you. It's like going to a silent disco with the headphones on and jam out to yourself with 1,000 other people doing exactly the same thing. Another thing is to look up, research, investigate, find out a group that suits. And the first group might not, and the second and third group might not, but there's a tribe out there of people that are suitable and helpful and my kind of language. And that's 3. But another one I want to leave with people is be unafraid to look at self. Every single person has a magic inside them, and unless you can find what that magic is, how can I cast the spells that I want to cast? Go out there, be your very best.
Nice. So before we wrap up, final thoughts and how can they get a hold of Complete Man?
Sure. This is the first time I've ever been on a podcast, guest starred on a podcast. It's quite an honour and just lovely to see you again.
It's an honour having you on too.
Appreciate it. You were at Complete Men. You attended Complete Men for the better part of a year, I suppose. Funny, you used to live in the same complex as me. So it's just lovely to see you again, to hear that you're back in the Gold Coast area, and I'm keen to hear of what you've been doing away. For Complete Men is a charity organisation. We have a website, www.completemen.org.au. There's a couple of groups operating on the Gold Coast. There's another group operates down in northern New South Wales. There's another online group, so those first 3 are in-person groups. There's another online group that happens every Tuesday night. Dan Rave runs that one online, and he operates it out of Sydney. But of course, it's global, it's internet based, and so people from all over the world attend that to suit their time slots. If anybody wants to come and join Complete Men, register online. There's a button top right that says men's groups. You can select online or in person. You can select which one. Register your name and attend the group. Come and join in and see what it's all about. It's for you and for you and for every single person that identifies themselves as male. How very inclusive. Man, it's a men's group. If someone was to identify and call themselves a woman, what's the point in going? Although we've talked about it, what if a woman who identifies as a man comes to the men's group? How do we? What? The decision wasn't reached on that. Consensus wasn't reached. It's such a delicate thing and such an unknown at the moment. But as a men's group, if somebody wants to come and join the men's group, then we'd be very glad to receive you and hold that space while they find out if it's for them. Our groups are now having 20 plus men attend each week, up from 6 and 8 a year and 2 years ago, and they're just eternally valuable, and we're creating that network of men who I can rely on, who they can rely on. It's comforting, and it makes it safe to be me. I'm out. Oh.
Hey, look, Lindsay, thanks again. It's honestly an honor having you on today's podcast, squeezing me in on a day where you were spending time with your partner, and I appreciate you squeezing me in for this time. So thank you again. And also, I'll leave the links in below in the description to how to get a hold of Complete Men. So, Lindsay,
Fabulous.
thanks again, mate.
Awesome, man. Glad to be part of it.